The room hummed with polite chatter, the kind that filled spaces where people weren't quite sure what to expect but pretended they did. Then it happened. A ripple of movement near the stage. Barron Trump stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. It wasn't just that he was there, it was how unusual it felt. He rarely spoke publicly, and now here he was, walking toward the microphone as if carrying something heavy, something unseen. When he opened his mouth, the first word caught in his throat, cracking slightly before finding its way out. A collective sharp intake of breath echoed through the ballroom. Champagne flutes froze mid-air, their golden contents trembling faintly under the sudden tension. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like a quiet storm. Some leaned closer, others exchanged puzzled glances. No one could have predicted this, not from him. There was something different about tonight. His posture stiffened at the podium, his hands gripping the edges tightly, as though holding on for balance. This wasn't going to be an ordinary speech. Somewhere deep inside, everyone seemed to sense it. What came next wasn't just a speech, it was a confession, someone might later say. Though no one knew it yet, for now, all they had were hints. Widened eyes scanned the room nervously, while some guests fidgeted in their seats, unsure whether to feel anticipation or dread. Barron hesitated, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them wonder. Was he nervous? Scared? Or was it something else entirely? Whatever it was, it hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. The faint clinking of glasses stopped altogether, replaced by a stillness so profound it almost felt tangible. Even the jazz band faded into nothingness, their soft melodies swallowed by the weight of the moment. All around, whispers grew quieter until even those ceased completely. Guests exchanged glances, leaning forward ever so slightly, their curiosity outweighing their decorum. Some whispered nervously to their neighbors, though their words were barely audible. Others simply stared, transfixed, as if afraid to blink and miss whatever would come next. Every eye in the room locked onto Barron, pinning him under a spotlight of expectation. The air buzzed with unspoken questions, each person silently urging him to speak, to break the spell he'd cast over them. And Barron stood there, frozen for a moment longer, aware of every pair of eyes trained on him, knowing that whatever he said next would change everything. The evening carried an air of luxury, one that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen constellations above, their golden glow spilling over towering floral arrangements that smelled faintly of roses. Guests mingled in black tie attire, their laughter and murmured conversations blending seamlessly with the soft notes of a jazz band playing somewhere nearby. Champagne flutes clinked gently as people toasted to causes they believed in, or perhaps just to the moment itself. There was something intoxicating about it all, a rhythm that pulsed beneath the surface. The polished gleam of the wood floors reflected the light, creating an illusion of endless space, while the faint scent of fresh blooms lingered in the air. It was beautiful, yes, but beauty often hides what lies beneath. And tonight, there was more here than met the eye. But even amidst the elegance, small signs betrayed a deeper unease. Chairs scraped faintly against the floor as guests shifted in their seats, adjusting postures or leaning forward ever so slightly. Conversations dipped and rose again, whispers growing louder when Barron approached the stage. His name rippled through the crowd like a quiet wave, curiosity sparking speculation. Who would have thought he'd speak tonight? He wasn't known for this kind of thing. Yet here he was, stepping into view, his presence stirring something unspoken among the attendees. Shadows danced across his face, dim lighting casting him in a way that made him seem both intriguing and vulnerable. Some leaned closer, eager to hear. Others exchanged wary glances, unsure of what might come next. Barron's hesitation was palpable, though no one could see it directly. They felt it. The weight of anticipation pressing down on them all. The room itself seemed split in two. The glittering center bathed in warm light, and the shadowy corners, where secrets seemed to linger, untouched by the chandelier's glow. This contrast only heightened the tension, making the gala feel less like a celebration and more like a stage waiting for its drama to unfold. Outwardly, everything appeared flawless. Elegant gowns, crisp suits, the soft hum of music filling the gaps between conversations. But beneath the surface, emotions simmered. Anticipation buzzed like electricity, invisible yet undeniable. Barron stood at the heart of it all, alone under the spotlight, surrounded by whispers and shadowed expressions. He didn't move immediately, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone wonder. What was he thinking? Was he nervous? Or was he simply gathering himself before speaking? Whatever it was, the audience couldn't look away. Their collective focus sharpened, drawn inexorably toward him, setting the stage for what was to come. Barron had always been the quiet one, a shadow in the bright glare of his family's larger-than-life presence. People knew him as the boy who stood silently beside his parents, rarely speaking unless spoken to. Tonight, though, something about him felt different. His posture was rigid, almost defensive, and his hands trembled faintly around the microphone. A subtle but undeniable sign that he was wrestling with something inside. It wasn't just nerves. It was deeper than that. There was an air of anticipation, as if he was stepping into uncharted territory. Fleeting expressions crossed his face. Doubt, resolve, hesitation, all hinting at emotions he kept carefully hidden beneath the surface. For once, Barron didn't seem like the distant figure everyone imagined him to be. He seemed human, vulnerable, and that made people curious. Earlier in the evening, Barron had stood backstage, staring at his reflection in a mirror framed by harsh lights. Should he really do this? The question looped endlessly in his mind, each iteration more suffocating than the last. What if they judged him? What if he stumbled over his words or said something wrong? Growing up in the spotlight hadn't prepared him for moments like this. It only taught him how to avoid them. He fidgeted with his cufflinks, twisting them until they dug into his skin. Avoiding eye contact with anyone nearby, he replayed old memories in his head, the friends he'd lost touch with after moving into the White House, the whispers of strangers dissecting his every move. He wanted so badly to connect, to let people see him for who he truly was. But fear held him back. Failure wasn't just a possibility, it felt inevitable. And yet, here he was, walking toward the stage despite everything. Maybe it was because, deep down, he knew he couldn't keep running from himself forever. Before the speech, while waiting near the dessert table, Barron met Emma. She wore a bright yellow dress that seemed to glow with her personality. Her voice was soft but steady when she asked, "Do you believe in miracles?" The question caught him off guard. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. There was no pretense, no agenda, just pure curiosity shining through wide, innocent eyes. In that moment, Emma stood out not because of her appearance, but because of her sincerity. She radiated warmth, a stark contrast to the polished veneer of the adults around her. Her question lingered in Barron's mind long after their brief exchange ended. It wasn't just a child's musings. It was a challenge, a spark that ignited something within him. Their interaction was fleeting, yet it carried a weight neither of them fully understood. When Emma asked her question, Barron hesitated, caught between his guarded demeanor and the unexpected honesty of her words. For a moment, he softened, not entirely, but enough to reveal a crack in the armor he'd built around himself. Emma watched him intently, her gaze unwavering. There was no judgment in her expression, only genuine interest. That simple act of listening forced Barron to pause and reflect, even if only for a second. He realized then that her question wasn't just about miracles. It was about hope, faith, and finding meaning in uncertainty. As they parted ways, a lingering sense of connection remained between them. Barron couldn't shake the feeling that Emma's words would shape what came next. Little did he know, they already had. Barron began with the expected formalities, his voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of unease. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said, pausing slightly longer than necessary between words. His gratitude toward the donors and organizers felt rehearsed, polite, but something about it didn't sit right. There were subtle signs that betrayed his nerves. His voice wavered faintly, almost imperceptibly, and his pauses stretched just a beat too long. It was as if he were buying time, searching for the courage to say what needed to be said next. The audience sensed it, though they couldn't quite put their finger on why the air felt heavier now. And then, just as Baron opened his mouth to continue, something unexpected happened. Something no one saw coming. From somewhere in the crowd, a small hand shot up timidly, cutting through the rhythm of Baron's speech. Everyone turned to look. A young girl, her bright yellow dress standing out even without visual cues. Her voice was soft but clear when she spoke. "Mr. Trump, do you think good people ever get lost?" The simplicity of the question struck like lightning. There was no pretense, no agenda, just pure curiosity wrapped in innocence. For a moment, the formality of the event dissolved entirely. Barron froze mid-sentence, caught completely off guard. The question wasn't just directed at him. It seemed to echo in everyone's minds, stirring thoughts they hadn't dared to voice. Emma's words carried weight far beyond her years, planting seeds of curiosity not only in Barron but also in the audience. What did she mean? And more importantly, what would he say? In the wake of Emma's question, the room fell eerily still. Glasses stopped midair, forks hovered above plates, and conversations died instantly. All movement ceased, replaced by an almost tangible tension. Some leaned forward, intrigued, while others exchanged puzzled glances. Whispers rippled faintly before fading into silence again. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, from polite applause and casual chatter to palpable anticipation. Every breath seemed louder, every heartbeat more pronounced. It was as though the entire room had been holding its collective breath, waiting for Barron to respond. The stillness pressed down on them all, heavy with unspoken questions. Barron stood frozen, his hands gripping the podium so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His eyes locked onto Emma's hopeful face, unable to look away. Inside, his mind raced. How could he answer such a profound question? What words could possibly capture the depth of what she was asking? He felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the weight of the moment rested solely on his shoulders. Each second stretched endlessly, heightening the tension. The audience waited, their anticipation growing with every passing heartbeat. Would he speak, or would he falter? Amid the charged silence, Emma remained calm, her patience unwavering. She sat quietly, her presence a stark contrast to the grandeur surrounding her. Despite the enormity of her question, there was no trace of doubt or hesitation in her demeanor. Her sincerity underscored the emotional stakes of the moment. In her quiet resolve, she symbolized hope, a small beacon amidst the uncertainty swirling around them. As Barron struggled to find his words, Emma simply waited, trusting that he would rise to the occasion. Her quiet confidence lingered in the air, adding another layer of depth to the unfolding drama. Whatever came next, it was clear that this moment would change everything. For both of them, Barron stepped back slightly from the podium, his hands gripping its edges as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. He took a deep breath, the kind that fills your lungs but does little to calm the storm inside. The room remained silent, the weight of Emma's question pressing down on everyone, including him. His fingers trembled faintly against the lectern, betraying the composure he was trying so hard to maintain. Each second stretched longer than the last, building anticipation in the audience. They leaned forward collectively, their curiosity growing with every heartbeat. What would he say? Would he answer at all? For Barron, this wasn't just a pause. It was a moment of reckoning. Every hesitation, every shaky breath spoke volumes about the internal battle raging within him. And though no words had been spoken yet, the tension in the air was almost unbearable. Finally, Barron began to speak, his voice low and measured. Growing up, it wasn't easy, he admitted, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. He recounted how the constant glare of media scrutiny had shaped, and sometimes warped, his sense of self. "I used to have friends," he said softly, his tone tinged into the White House. "I lost touch with them. It's hard to explain. You start feeling like you don't belong anywhere." His admission revealed moments of isolation, loneliness, hidden beneath the facade of privilege and fame. He paused again, reflecting on simpler times before public life consumed him. Days spent playing outside, laughing without a care in the world. Those memories felt distant now, almost like they belonged to someone else. The contrast between who he was then and who he had become weighed heavily on his heart. Then Barron shared a memory that changed everything for him. A visit to a hospital with his mother, Melania. We met a boy there, he said, his voice softening further. He was fighting cancer, but you'd never know it from the way he smiled. It was unwavering. The sterile smell of antiseptic lingered in his mind even now, mingling with the faint beeping of machines monitoring fragile lives. Yet amidst the coldness of the hospital, the boy radiated warmth and hope. He told me he wanted to be an astronaut when he got better, Barron continued, his voice cracking slightly. Even though the odds were stacked against him, he believed. That encounter left an indelible mark on Barron, teaching him resilience and compassion. For the first time, he realized that hope could exist even in darkness, that faith wasn't about certainty, but about believing anyway. It made me think, Barron added quietly, about what really matters, about kindness, love, things bigger than ourselves. Barron lowered his gaze, his vulnerability laid bare. There were days when I felt lost, he confessed, his voice trembling. I didn't know where I fit in the world, or if I ever would. He talked about missing moments of normalcy, longing for connections that felt genuine rather than forced. You start wondering if anyone sees you for who you really are, he said, gripping the podium tighter. If you even know who you are anymore. This raw honesty broke down barriers between him and the audience. They weren't just listening to a celebrity. They were hearing from a person, flawed and searching like everyone else. As Barron continued, each word peeled back another layer of emotion, drawing the audience deeper into his journey. I didn't have all the answers, he admitted, but I kept searching, hoping. Phrases like these resonated deeply, evoking empathy and understanding. His struggles became theirs. His search for meaning mirrored their own. The unresolved tension lingered in the air, setting up the emotional crescendo to come. Readers yearned for resolution, not just for Barron, but for themselves, for the universal truths his story illuminated. Finally, Barron spoke, his voice steady but charged with emotion. Yes, he began, pausing just long enough to let the weight of his words settle. Good people sometimes get lost, but what makes them good is that they find their way back to kindness, to love, to faith. The simplicity of his response struck a chord. It wasn't elaborate or rehearsed. It was raw, honest, and deeply human. The room fell silent again, any lingering murmurs fading into nothingness. Heads nodded subtly, eyes widened as if everyone had been holding their breath, waiting for this exact moment of clarity. His answer resonated far beyond the confines of the question itself. It was universal, timeless, a truth that transcended age, status, or circumstance. And in that instant, Barron transformed from a distant figure into someone profoundly relatable. Emma sat quietly, her small frame radiating an unexpected depth of understanding. Tears welled up in her eyes, shimmering with unspoken emotion. She nodded slowly, deliberately, as though she understood more than anyone could have anticipated from someone so young. Her innocence stood in stark contrast to the gravity of Barron's words, yet it only amplified their impact. In her quiet acknowledgement, there was hope. Hope that even the most profound struggles could lead to redemption. Her tear-streaked face became a symbol of connection, bridging the gap between Barron's vulnerability and the audience's shared humanity. But Barron wasn't finished. His stoic facade cracked under the weight of the moment, revealing the man beneath. "I'm still finding my way," he admitted, his voice breaking as tears threatened to spill over. His hands trembled against the podium, his shoulders slumping slightly as if releasing years of pent-up emotion. Each word felt like it came at great cost, yet also brought immense relief. He wasn't just speaking to Emma anymore. He was speaking to himself, to the audience, to anyone who had ever felt lost. This admission shattered the last barriers between him and those listening. No longer was he the enigmatic figure they had speculated about. He was human, flawed, and searching, just like them. The room erupted, not with polite applause, but with heartfelt standing ovations. The sound of clapping filled the space, mingling with sniffles and murmured reactions. Strangers embraced one another, moved by the collective catharsis Barron's words had sparked. Guests wiped away tears, their faces reflecting a mix of gratitude and introspection. The tension that had gripped the room earlier dissolved entirely, replaced by unity. Everyone was connected now, bound together by the realization that they weren't alone in their struggles. It wasn't just Barron's story, it was theirs too. As the applause continued, the ballroom seemed bathed in golden light, not because of any visual cue, but because of the warmth of shared emotion. The crowd stood as one, united in their response to Barron's message. Barron looked out at them, his expression a mix of gratitude and resolve. There was no need for further words. The moment spoke for itself. Readers were left with a lasting impression of healing and hope, setting the stage for what would come next. Barron's voice softened, but his words carried a weight that filled the room. "We're all searching for something," he said, pausing to let the truth sink in. "Maybe we won't always find it right away, but as long as we keep looking, we're never truly lost." The simplicity of his message struck a chord, resonating deeply with everyone present, and even those who weren't. It was a comforting promise, one that lingered in the air like an unspoken vow. His tone conveyed not just hope, but certainty, a belief that perseverance could lead to meaning, even in moments of doubt. For many, it felt like permission to keep going, to trust the journey despite its uncertainties. And though Barron didn't say another word after that, the silence spoke volumes. In those final lines, everything came full circle. Barron's struggles with identity, the isolation he'd felt growing up under constant scrutiny, merged seamlessly with Emma's innocent question about being lost. Her unwavering faith in miracles had sparked this moment of clarity, tying resilience and human connection into a single thread. His reflection wasn't just for himself. It was for everyone who had ever questioned their place in the world. The boy battling cancer at the hospital, the friends he'd lost touch with, Emma's quiet courage. All these moments culminated here, creating a tapestry of shared humanity. It was cathartic, leaving readers with a profound sense of understanding. This wasn't just Barron's story anymore. It belonged to them too. As the audience absorbed his words, a collective mood of quiet awe settled over them. Some sat still, processing what they'd heard, while others exchanged glances filled with renewed determination. There was a shared optimism in the air, an unspoken agreement that life, no matter how uncertain, held possibilities worth pursuing. Barron's message stayed with them long after the event ended, a reminder that hope could be found even in the darkest corners. It wasn't just uplifting, it was universal, ensuring that its impact would linger far beyond the night itself. As the applause faded, Barron stepped off stage and knelt down to Emma's level, his movements deliberate and heartfelt. He looked her in the eye, his expression soft but filled with emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The intimacy of the moment stood in stark contrast to the grandeur of the gala. There were no spotlights here, no audience watching. Just two people sharing a connection that transcended words. Barron's gratitude felt genuine, as if Emma had given him something far more valuable than applause or admiration. Emma didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly with the kind of sincerity only a child could offer. Her small frame seemed fragile, yet impossibly strong in that moment. "You found your way tonight," she whispered, her words soft but unwavering. It was both an affirmation and a gift, a reminder that Barron's journey wasn't just about answering a question, it was about rediscovering himself. Her statement carried weight, tying back to everything they'd shared. The struggles, the hope, the resilience. For Barron, it felt like closure, like he'd finally been seen for who he truly was. Around them, the buzz of conversation continued, quieter now, but still present. Guests lingered, processing what they'd witnessed. Not just Barron's speech, but the humanity behind it. There was a sense of unity in the air, a shared understanding that stretched beyond the room. Hope mingled with reflection, leaving everyone touched by the evening's events. As Barron rose to his feet, Emma's words echoed in his mind. They weren't just for him. They were for everyone who dared to keep searching. And with that thought, the story ended on a note of quiet optimism. ensuring its emotional resonance would stay with readers long after the final word.